Hello everyone. So now we are going to discuss how to declare a basic class and objects in Python. So the class and objects are the very basic primitives in a object-oriented programming paradigm. So we have seen how to declare the class and objects in other languages like C++ and Java. Python also uses the similar kind of thing, but there is a slight difference in declarations. So we will take one example here called adding two complex numbers. So we take two complex numbers and we perform the addition over it and we will display the sum. This we are going to do it with the help of class and the members inside the class, that's the member functions inside the class, and also by using a driver program to test the class as well. So first, to declare a class in Python, we declare a keyword called class and followed by the class name, which is user defined. It's a user identifier. So complex is the class name. And to start the class, we use the colon. So this colon indicates the start of a block. And followed by this, the Python has their own indentation. So whichever comes in straight line to this, the indentation, that will be considered to be a part of this class. So there is no opening bracket and closing bracket here. Only the indentations are very much used here. Now for any class to get constructed automatically, we use a constructor, right? So for the constructor, we use a magic function here called init. So whenever we have uh, two underscores, two subsequent underscores are under both the prefix and the suffix of the init function or any other function, which is referred to as a magic function in Python. So this is going to act as a constructor for this class. And this constructor, it is a parameterized constructor where it will take two arguments R and I. In addition to that, so we must have at least one object for any methods that we use in a Python. So we represent that own object as a self, then followed by the variables that we are going to use, the parameters that we are going to use. So for an example here, for a complex number, we need the real and imaginary. So the R represents the real value input and I represents the imaginary values input. So whatever we receive through R, we pass it on to the real of the object. Whenever we say self, it basically represents an object that invokes this function. Okay. So when a function, a class is created, it's going to be created with these two attributes called real and imaginary. So whatever is received from R will be given to the real of the particular object, and whatever received through I will be passed on to the imaginary of the object. And next we have a function called a string function, which basically returns the values in the form of a string over here. So the string also, it basically used with the object only. So that is why we have passed the self as an argument over here. And for a function definition, as we know, to start the mark of the function, we use the colon over here, followed by that Python indentation follows. Then this string, it basically determines how our print statement will be printing the a string value on the screen. So this is a kind of a overloading functions. What we can do, we can write the statements in such a way how we want to print the values on the screen. So here with the string function is going to ultimately it's going to return a string. So what do? We convert the real value into a string, an object that's going to make use. That is going to be that's called a self. So of that object, the real of that object will be converted into string, and the plus represents the concatenation operation, and with a string called plus j, because we want to represent A plus j b form. So plus j, then plus the imaginary value of the string of an imaginary value. Okay, because these are all basically going to be a number, but on the screen when you want to display, we want to display it as a string. Okay, so by defining like this a string object string method, we can define how to uh, do the print function. So let us see with an example also in the coming. And the next what we have is called an another function called ADD. Already I mentioned that whenever we use two subsequent underscores, a prefix and a suffix to a particular name, that is called a magic function. And in this context, this add is basically an overloading function. So what we do, we define a purpose for this add function so that it will do the intended work. So now here our aim is to add two complex numbers. Now where will be the complex numbers? The complex numbers will be in the object. So for each complex number, one object will be there. So there is one object called as self. That means a method that is invoking this add is referred to as the self object. In addition to that, we'll be having one more object called comp, which will have the operands for the or the complex numbers for the second number. So now we here perform the addition over here. That is, the real of self will be added with the real of comp, and the result will be stored in another object, that is CP underscore real. That means the object called CP will be there. In that, there will be a real attribute will be there. On that, it will be stored. Then self imaginary will be added with the complex imaginary, and that will be stored into the attribute of another object. Now the third object is constructed, and now whenever the function is being called, it should return the sum of the real of self and the sum of the imaginary of the comp should be written through these two variables cp underscore real and cp underscore imaginary as an object. As an object. So what do we do? Now we return the complex object by passing the two required attributes cp underscore real and also the cp underscore imaginary. Then we define a one more function. It's called user defined function, where you can see that there is no underscores are there in the prefix and in the suffix to the function name, but every function ensures that it is invoked with the help of an object. So that is why we pass the self as an argument over here. Now to start the function, we use the colon, then the indentation starts over here. So here it's user defined function where we have written a statement in such a way. The real a plus j b format is to be given in a way self dot real is a number. It's going to be a number. Comma is a concatenation once again here in Python. Then plus j as a string. Then comma self dot imaginary number. So one object is going to make use of this show, and in that object, whatever the real and imaginary will be portrayed in the output. Now, when you look at the driver program here in Python, so since it is a parameterized constructors, it's a complex, it's a parameterized constructor. We use the complex constructor with the two values 5 comma 10. So this is going to construct an object called x. Please see that how we define an object here. So the object is defined as x is equal to complex of 5 comma 10. So now x is an object which is having two variables, real and imaginary. So the real value of the x is going to be the 5 and the imaginary value of x is going to be 10. Now similarly, we construct one more object for another complex number. So that is what y. So y is going to have a real number of 9 and the imaginary number of 35. Now to illustrate the difference between the print statements and whatever we have used, what do we do now? We try to invoke the print statement for the x object. So as I told you, we have written a function here called str, the string function, which will return a string, which will accept one argument of self object. So now when we pass the print of x, an object x is passed into the string function, which will in turn convert the real of the x into string and the real of imaginary of x into a string, and that will be concatenated together and will give the output. And similarly for a y we do that. Then also, in order to utilize the overloaded function, no overloaded function here, so what we do, we use the plus symbol, right? The plus symbol, what it does, it invokes this add function over here. As it invokes the add function, it will add the object x. That is, now in the when the value is passed on to this overloaded function, the x is going to be the left hand operand will be the self, will be the object that invokes this function, and y is an object that passed as an argument into this function. So the self is nothing but x and comp is nothing but an y. So now the self real and comp real will get added over here. Then self imaginary and complex imaginary will be added here and put together. That's going to return an another object. That's going to be another object. This object, whatever the returned object, now will be passed as an input to the string, which will take the complex real and the complex imaginary, whatever we are bringing in, values of that will be printed on the screen. Then to demarcate, we just have one print statement over here. Now we use the user defined function. The user defined function also, it has to be used in conjunction with an object. So for what object we are using this now? I want to print the values of the x. So the values of the x is going to be printed here. The self is going to be replaced by x now. So x dot real plus j x dot imaginary will be printed. And similarly for the second one, then y dot show, the self will be y and the real of y and imaginary of y will be printed on the screen with a slight difference. This is what we are discussing about. So for line number 21, the input value, the input value will be 5 plus j 10, which is in the form of a string. Please understand that. Similarly, for line number 22, the output value is 9 plus j 35. Once again, this is in the form of string. Line number 23, the operation is done on x and y. Addition operation is done on x and y. And the value is the sum value. It's going to be printed with the help of the string function. Again, in the form of a string only. That is 14 plus j 45. Whereas line number 25, it uses the user defined function show. And this user defined function show, it returns the value like this 5. Then after some space, plus j, again some space, the imaginary number. Similarly for y also, that prints the same value. That is the value of y, the real value of y and the imaginary value of y will be printed. So it's a very simple example to illustrate how to declare the class and objects in Python and how to make use of the overloading methods and how to define a constructor and many other values. So thank you. Thank you for watching.